I don't know if you think that this short-term extension is possible by even Friday. At this point, is the president doing enough to make it clear that Bill Pulte will eventually have some separation from the nation's intelligence services?
Look, I think that we have to extend FISA. To me, as a New York Republican in a post-9/11 world, I think there's a few things that are more critical at this moment, and to make sure that that FISA authority remains with the intelligence community. It has stopped terror attacks. It has provided necessary information to keep our country safe. And it is critical that it does get extended, particularly when you think about all that is happening this year. It's not just the 25th anniversary of September 11th. It is, you have the World Cup starting this weekend. You have the Knicks. You have America 250 events coming. There's just so much activity, not to mention the conflict with Iran. So there's a lot happening right now where we need to make sure that our intelligence community has that as a tool, because it's just so critically important.
We've been discussing the fact that it's not top of mind or in front of Americans the way a TSA shutdown might be, where you've got lines at airports. There's a point of pressure here. Not everyone knows what FISA 702 is. What would you tell someone in Staten Island who asked you, who cares what happens if it expires? What would we lose?
Yeah, and part of the reason why the average person doesn't know what FISA is because it is so heavily classified, and you can't even publicly give examples of the types of things that have been stopped because of it. Although there were reports that in 2024 there was a potential attack at the Taylor Swift concert, for example, that was thwarted because of FISA. But basically, it is a tool that is used, a surveillance tool that the intelligence community uses to track foreign individuals not on U.S. soil, and that is how they conduct a lot of this investigation. Now, the controversy with some of the members of Congress, has been that if that foreign individual outside of the United States communicates with somebody who is in the United States and is an American citizen, those are the privacy concerns that some of the members have. But I think that at minimum, we should be able to do a short-term extension of the existing law. There's still negotiations that are happening in terms of whether there should be a warrant or not a warrant if an American citizen inadvertently got swooped up in an investigation of a foreign individual. So I think that, but we can't let it go dark. I think that's the bottom line for people like me who are very concerned about what could happen if FISA were to go offline and that tool was taken away. And remember, there were a number of reforms, about 50 reforms that were added about 2 years ago when FISA was reauthorized. And so there were already very significant reforms. And remember, President Trump had been one of the biggest critics of FISA because he felt that
used against him.
Exactly. And he's the one saying we need to, we cannot let this thing expire, and that there were reforms. And so he's advocating for, and hopefully can convince some of those members who have been kind of reluctant right now to support it.
Well, I wonder what you make of the president's timing decisions here, tapping Bill Pulte as acting DNI just before FISA expires, having the DOJ announce this anti-weaponization fund just before you're trying to get through a massive budget reconciliation package. Is he just making it more difficult for those of you who stood up on Capitol Hill?
I think maybe it wasn't the most politically savvy things to be saying when you're trying to get certain things done. Look, you got to love President Trump for his honesty, right? He's very blunt. He's out there. He's transparent. He says what he feels. He does what he thinks is the right thing. I think that it probably was not the best timing if he truly wants Pulte to have that position. With that said, I think that a lot of members are looking to see if we could get somebody a little more qualified specifically in the national security space. We think, and I think that that's probably where this is going to end up. It'll probably be somebody else, and I think is concern about that, and he needs to address it over the next 24 hours or so for us to get this, I think, across the finish line.
Before we move on, though, should people brace for at least a temporary expiration, or could this still be saved by Friday?
Look, I'm hopeful that we will get the job done. I've spoken with folks over at the White House, folks at the speaker, and I mean everyone understands how critical this is, and we've been told to not rush out of here. Usually the last vote of the week, everyone's already planning. It's a mass exodus. We need to stick around. I'm prepared to stick around, and we need the members to stay here. And I think that the attendance does become a problem, though. And I think that's irresponsible. I think the members need to stay here until FISA is extended, and a short-term extension, I think, probably is the only solution at this time, considering how late it is. And the Democrats have already said they're not going to help at all. So if they're not going to help at all, we need every Republican to stay here and just do that temporary extension to make sure that it stays online.
Well, as we consider what else the president is grappling with here, he announced in the Oval Office earlier that the U.S. is going to be attacking Iran very hard, to use his words, after we saw the response yesterday to the downing of the Apache helicopter. In your mind, is it in the best interest of the United States to just go forward with the military option in the absence of real progress on diplomacy?
Look, it's hard for me to say without having all the information in front of me of what, the military with the intelligence is saying. I do believe that Iran has been dragging its feet, and if they're not going to come to a deal, then we're going to have to deal with them in a different way. And, the president has made these threats, and if he's making these threats that they're going to take military action if there's no progress in negotiations, I think he needs to follow through with that. I think you can't. I think you can't bluff in this situation, and it's too serious. This needs to be resolved. And as Secretary Rubio says, it's got to be resolved one way or the other. And so I think that it's good to be pushing Iran, but at some point he's going to have to make a decision if they're going to just use military force to get the strait back and to try to put an end overall to their capabilities, any nuclear capabilities. I think it's in Iran's best interest to make a deal, but they also know, with an election coming up, that time is on their side in a sense, right? Even though the president says that's not true, and I think the president is working on his own timeline. He may not be as concerned about the midterms as some of the other, some of us are. But at the end of the day, we need to do what's in the best interest to ensure that Iran does not have that nuclear weapon, that the strait opens up, the oil begins flowing again, and that that enriched uranium gets turned over to somebody. It may not be the United States, but maybe an intermediary, but it's got to get out of the hands of the Iranian regime.
Well, we saw evidence today that for a third month, this war or conflict, whatever you want to call it, is pushing prices higher, and look no further than the gas station. I noticed today, knowing you were going to join us, New York is actually above the national average. Nationally, $4.15. I think you're at $4.42 in New York. President was asked today about prices, and you might have heard his response by now. It's a little bit difficult to tell exactly what he meant with his answer, but let's listen. He had reporters in the Oval Office a short time ago.
The numbers were great. You know what I really love? I love the inflation. You know why? Because as soon as this war is over, I can say it now. Something you didn't know. Do you know we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil? Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now.
Interesting. I love the inflation is going to be in campaign ads, whether it's out of context or not, right? For months ahead. It's unclear how he meant that. I think he's suggesting that because it's going to fall, he's getting a kick out of these numbers now. I'm not sure. What does it mean for your voters, though, and for your reelection campaign?
Well, I don't love inflation. My constituents don't love inflation. I don't love high gas prices. My constituents don't like high gas prices. I do agree with one thing that the president did say, is that it's going to come down, and it's going to come down quickly as soon as this is over. Remember, President Trump brought gas prices below $3, and it was the first time we saw that in 4 years. Under Joe Biden, it had gone all the way up to $5. It always stayed roughly between like $4 and $5 the entire 4 years. And so I do believe that he has the ability to drastically bring down those prices, but we need to get out of this. And I think that that's the key here. How is that going to happen? Because the negotiation is taking longer than we anticipated. And I think that, we just need to see how because even if it were to open today, the strait, it could take months for those prices to still reflect. Sure. And, still some of the open tariff issues that we have, there's still a lot of questions there. And so that's coming into play as well. I think long term, what he's doing today will have a positive impact long term, but for the short term, it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride. Yeah.
Well, the president just posted on True Social, Congresswoman, that he last month secretly directed the military to support oil tankers and other commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. He says, quote, "Today, I am pleased to announce this effort has resulted in more than 100 million barrels of oil making its way through the strait and into the open market. More than 200 commercial ships have safely traveled through the strait. So perhaps we were secretly doing Project Freedom all along, but I would imagine this rings as good news to you.
Well, that is welcome news, and I think again what you're seeing, and this is why I think prices when this gets resolved, it will come down, because look, we've ramped up domestic energy production. Now we have a much better relationship with Venezuela, right? And we're benefiting from that as well in terms of oil. And then now you're going to see the strait opening up and these barrels getting through. That's about 20% of the global market. Yeah. And obviously, the global market is what really affects those prices, not just that America's producing more, so, the prices come down for us. It's a global issue. And so I think that, these three things combined will be better in the long run. Now, New York is a different story. Now, why you say New York is above the national average is, honestly, it's because of a lot of terrible policies at the state level. I mean, New York has crushed the energy sector, and electric bills have skyrocketed. Gas prices for your heating your home have skyrocketed. And
your state taxes are the reason why a gallon costs more than the national average.
It's the state taxes, but it's also 26% of the energy supply or electricity supply was at Indian Point Power Plant, right? And they have closed that down in the state of New York, and now that's putting a lot of pressure on the industry. So I think that New York, sadly, like California, above average on most things when it comes to cost, and that's because a lot of the local state issues that come into play that affect that. Now, I've also temporarily introduced a bill to temporarily suspend the federal gas tax.
That's right.
I think that's good for commuters, and it's also good. It's for diesel as well. That'll help out farmers. It'll help out truckers and shipping industry. I think that's something we can do temporarily just to ease the pain at the pump until this gets resolved.